welcome. You're watching this very special episode on Times Network. We're talking about India and Australia and the role that education plays when it comes to bilateral trade. Mihir Bhatt interacted with experts coming in from the education space to really talk about the role of digitization and how it has changed the way education is being done in the country today and across the world, and also what students need to be prepared for going forward when it comes to education, as well as the role that education plays when it comes to bilateral trade. All of those conversations on this episode tonight. Do listen.
Deakin University and the Indian government's Ministry of Education and Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship have come together to announce a first-of-its-kind government-university industry partnership. The partnership will offer scholarships, fellowships, skilling and training programs to strengthen the India-Australia relationship and lead the way forward for innovative knowledge sharing and student exchanges between the two countries. This partnership is Deakin's commitment to India's pursuit of excellence in education and will enrich the communities in both India and Australia with unique perspectives and experiences that expand the horizons of students and make them more competitive in the global economy.
I think the focus on the bilateral relations between India and Australia is like never before. And obviously, that comes from the leadership level itself. So the Indian leadership and the Australian leadership, they are fully committed. And in fact, the three cornerstones of the bilateral relationship between India and Australia are obviously the three E's as we define it. That is economy, education, and energy. And what we are going to do today is we are going to speak about education extensively because that happens to be one of the core areas where both the countries are partnering, and in a way both the countries are helping each other in excelling on a global stage. And I'm joined by a very esteemed panel for this discussion. I have obviously Sarah with me, who is Deputy Australian High Commissioner to India. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I have Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, who is Distinguished Fellow at Vivekananda International Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. I'm also joined by Professor Ian Martin, who is President and Vice Chancellor of Deakin University. Hi, Martin. And I'm joined by Dr. C. Rajkumar, Vice Chancellor, O.P. Jindal University. Thank you, sir, for joining us. So I think let me start with Sarah. Sarah, we were just speaking before this session started that how both the countries are working together. And education is one area where, the ties have been really thick. Our education minister also traveled to Australia, and he's so passionate about this whole bilateral cooperation that's happening between both the countries. So if you can just give us an overview in terms of how the relationship with focus on education has evolved over a period of time.
Thank you so much, Mihir. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and thank you. It's wonderful to see so many faces in the room, and I know there are also people watching online. So thank you for your interest, because as the daughter of educators, but now a diplomat, education is something I'm very passionate about. It is absolutely a central pillar of our relationship, and one of my jobs as a diplomat is to explain why that matters in terms of our relationships. So we have a comprehensive strategic partnership. It's been elevated to that level, and it's just extraordinary to see the level of engagement across the board. And I see education as the flagship of our soft pillar, our soft diplomacy and our people-to-people ties. It is something on which both of our natural interests align. We can really work to leverage off each other in terms of driving the education links. And this is not just straight up education, it's about how we drive our research and our collaboration, our innovation to make us more competitive and each of us and stronger partners. Thank you.
Right. Sarah, also, if you look at international education, obviously it's one of the largest, in fact, the largest services export when it comes to Australia. So, yeah, in a way, the way our relation between India and Australia will evolve over a period of time in the education sector is also going to play a very crucial role in the bilateral trade. So it's directly linked to the economic cooperation that both the countries are aiming at. So how do you see this evolution powered by education evolving into a great trade bilateral relationship between both the countries?
I can assure you that the linkages are very strong and deep, and the architecture is there to really provide a great baseline, working off, for instance, the national education policy. This is truly visionary to really harvest what is in both of our interests, to meet Australia's skill shortages and to skill up India's workforce.
Right. My next question is for you. Deakin has been present in India since 1994, and obviously it has played a crucial role in terms of opening the education corridor between India and Australia. So what are the linkages between the education sector in India and Australia and its impact on the bilateral cooperation between both the countries?
I think there's the formal pieces of this, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but I think there is the very strong informal relationships that have been founded off the back of education that actually I think are the most important. What do I mean by that? We've had, coming through Deakin now, nearly 30 years of students who've built friendships, associations between India and Australia. We return, we continue to grow those. So that soft aspect, the soft diplomacy that's come from that is so important, and I think is probably almost the most important thing we've done over those 30 years. But those partnerships build greater educational expertise. They offer excellent Indian and Australian education fused together to a broader range of students by changing some of the convenience, changing some of the cost points. But I think also they bring a really important perspective for students in that they will get to see challenges, issues and problems through the lens of two countries rather than just one country. And I've been coming to India now for 35 years. It's very different to the countries I worked in, but actually the challenges and problems are nearly all identical. How do we educate our population well? How do we provide safe, secure health and social care? Increasingly, how do we manage our environment, our water resources, our food resources? How do we deal with the challenges of technology is great for opportunities, but it's throwing down a whole load of challenges both in social cohesion and cybersecurity. And how do we manage the issues of climate change? Having two countries' perspectives on those problems is absolutely vital. And as Sarah's pointed out, Australia is absolutely desperately in need of the skills that the Indian workforce is bringing to Australia at the moment, and we hope that we can reciprocate that and mirror it back into India through different ways. So, a lot happening, but it is truly exciting.
Right. Dr. Rajkumar, my next question is for you. Because we are speaking about skilling, and there is a serious focus on skilling in the new national education policy also. How important is, one, the national education policy with all its perspectives, and second, how the cooperation between Australia and India from that point of view adds to it?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mihir. And you see, one of the things that, since we're discussing this in the larger context of the India-Australia bilateral relationship, I must say that the partnerships that Deakin is establishing in India, and of course, Indian students going to Australia, all of this is going to be good and will be expanding as well. But one of the cornerstones of this partnership could be, how can we sort of significantly enhance the Indian vision for becoming a global destination for higher education? I mean, something that we have not paid enough attention to. And in my earlier remarks, I talked about what we were 2,000 years ago. But today's context is quite significant because A, we are a pluralistic liberal democracy. B, we are a large population of young people. And C, we are looked up significantly by Africa and South Asia for potential opportunities in higher education. Here we have a situation where a large number of young people need to be educated. Australian example is so telling, where they have been able to build quality and quantity together. This ought to be the centerpiece of the India-Australia bilateral relationship.
I'm going to take a quick break on that note. We're back in just a moment. Just stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Times Network. Tonight, we're talking about the role of education when it comes to bilateral trade between India and Australia.
Mr. Wadhwa, now obviously there is one more dimension when it talks about when we talk about education. How it helps Indian businesses, or how Indian businesses, Indian universities can leverage this opportunity that exists in Australia. One is obviously the Australian universities coming to India and helping India educate young Indians. How does it work other way around?
So Mihir, one of the important planks of the India-Australia bilateral relationship is the technology and innovation aspect. And increasingly, the dependencies have grown between each other. India, of course, will benefit a lot from the Australian experience, especially in the e-mobility program, for instance. We also have new areas which are emerging. For example, technologies related to climate change. India is becoming a big hub for e-commerce, for example. And Australia always innovates as it goes along. So Indian industry has to look forward to the new areas of collaboration with Australia. In fact, train their workforce in order to be able to tackle the new age technologies. Now, animation and gaming is something, for example, which can create a win-win situation. We've had a fantastic partnership as far as startups are concerned. The results are there for everyone to see. And something similar can be replicated in many other fields.
Right. Now, Professor Rajkumar, with reference to Martin's point, what all we as an education system or as a country need to do to really bring ourselves up to speed, especially with the age bracket 22 to 70 that you rightly referred.
Yeah. Well, so I think, first of all, Mihir, one of the things that the national education policy has recognized is that it has recognized the role of the private sector. For a very long time, the Indian higher education system was driven almost exclusively by the public sector. Now, the data is now much more stronger. 70% of Indian higher education institutions are in the private sector. 70% of students are studying in private higher education institutions. And so it's been a tectonic shift in which the role of private sector has been recognized. There has been a recognition in the NEP that we need to have kind of lean and thin regulation. The regulatory reimagination of the Indian higher education system, I believe, is going to provide enormous opportunities for both Indian and Australian higher education institutions to collaborate better and to have a meaningful impact on that itself. Today, we need to focus on multidisciplinary universities, and existing universities should become more and more interdisciplinary when it comes to their teaching pedagogy, their approach to research, their opportunities that they give for students. And the last bit is that we need to also recognize the role of how corporations, companies, business enterprises, think tanks, non-governmental organizations, intergovernmental organizations, others who are outside the university system can partner effectively with the universities.
Sarah, since we are talking about bilateral relationships, one important aspect is the way things have changed post-pandemic. Not only in the field of education or the way people educate themselves or the way they enroll for online courses and all, that is one part of it. Second is, at a global level, there is a renewed attempt to de-risk the whole global supply chain, look at the whole Indo-Pacific region from a new lens, ensuring that it remains free. And in that perspective, I think India and Australia are going to play a very vital role going forward for the global trade. Now, from that point of view, obviously, education is going to be one of the key pillars for this strategic engagement that India and Australia are undertaking. How do you see that part evolving? Because obviously, it involves a closely knit interaction or bilateral relations, starting with education, extending into economic relations, and eventually extending into strategic relations between both the countries.
Wow, there was a lot in there. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
There's many ways in which I would answer that. One is that, as I've mentioned, we have all of the bilateral architecture there, the drive from our highest levels of government. We have the commitment of institutions like Deakin, like Tata, like Jindal, to really drive this education. We identify education is a key component of that, and it's really urgent. It's a call to arms for the private sector, for education institutions, for think tanks to collaborate. That's why, for instance, the machine learning course that has been developed with TCS in partnership with Deakin is so innovative. It's a way to really provide the workforce with the skills it needs. Managers need to know how to handle machine learning, and it's something that we wouldn't have done in our earlier courses. So just to wrap up, I think that it's just so important that we really take this opportunity and drive it forward, because it can only be the best outcome for our region, for the Indo-Pacific, to drive supply chain security and to drive prosperity and growth. Thank you.
My last question is for you, and Sarah, you can add to that after he answers. But India just celebrated 75 years of independence, and already India is sort of aiming its sights on India at 24/7, which is going to be 100 years of independence. And there is a clear attempt to turn India into a developed nation by 2047. It cannot happen unless there is a serious focus and there are serious efforts to revamp the whole education system, including skilling and all. What role universities like Deakin can play in and help India achieve that goal?
I think the challenge is there, but as somebody who's been in and out of the country for 35 years, I don't think India should understate what you've achieved over the last 3.5 or 4 decades, which has been quite extraordinary in terms of the development that has happened. We can continue to contribute by meaningful partnerships, and I think that is where we come together to look at the challenges that need to be addressed, because that will have collateral benefit back to Australia. Ultimately, we have to recognise that that will mean a changing relationship for Australian universities in India. I think we've got a while before we need to think it's going to change too much, just because of the scale that we're talking about. But I think the key to this is the partnership piece. The challenges that you face are actually really not that different to the challenges that Australia faces. They're stacked in a different order. They might have different solutions. But I think we can work together. And for much of our 30-odd years in India, we've had an in India, with India, for India policy that's underpinned what we've done. That will continue to be important. We can continue to contribute very much with that sense of partnership, and I think that's the key thing. It's not a one-way transaction.
Absolutely. Sarah, your closing remarks?
Thank you very much. I would just add to that by saying this is not a one-way street. This is not a brain drain. This is about skilling up India's workforce and potentially, for instance, in meeting our needs with skill shortages, enabling students to have greater post-study work rights in Australia. That's already embedded into our initial interim trade agreement. And it is also, I think, just a spirit of consistency, agility, determination, and showing up. So I would commend Deakin for its partnership, for being sensitive to the very clearly defined framework set out by the Government of India to really lift its workforce and enhance skills and bring greater prosperity to Indian citizens leading up to 2047. Education is the means through which to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us, and all of you, thank you so much. I think the future looks exciting. A lot has happened between India and Australia in space of education, energy, and economy, and I think it's only going to get better from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all from us today on that big picture topic. That's all we could manage to fit in. Thank you so much for watching.